What's going on, guys? Derrick here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we are talking about some early round running backs with the importance of trying to hit on as many of these running backs with a secure workload in the early rounds. It's important to know which ones we should be targeting, which ones we should be avoiding. So on draft day, we feel confident in our early round picks. Before we do get into the video though, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was from week 7 on last season. The top 6 wide receivers in points per game were Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Parker, Julio Jones, and Devontae Adams. Which wide receiver ranked just behind these players in 7th? The correct answer was Marvin Jones. Congratulations, Steve last name, you got this one right. As for today's stat of the day, which wide receiver with at least 50 receptions had the longest reception of 2019? Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Also, guys, with the draft quickly approaching, consider signing up for our draft package. We may not be able to break down every player on video, but we do have player breakdowns on all draftable players. You'll have access to our rankings, sleepers, targets, and busts. So if you're not sure how we do feel about a specific player, it's all in the draft package. We also have consistency charts, offensive line rankings, and more. So if that interests you, go to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, link as always in the description box below. So I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about some running backs who we may have glossed over throughout this offseason, but they're being drafted in the early rounds and we haven't talked about them as much. The first player I am going to mention is Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings. We have Dalvin Cook ranked as the running back 6, firmly planted in that first tier of running backs with Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So clearly we are high on him, we expect big things from him, and the main concerns heading into this season was the potential holdout. New CBA rules came out that holdout really wouldn't have benefited him at all, so he's reported that is no longer a thing. We still don't have him listed as a target, but it more has to do with the injury history of Dalvin Cook, the potential for this team to maybe not be as run heavy as they were last season, and although we still do want him on our team because if we're drafting in the early first round, we want to secure a running back with as much upside as possible. Dalvin Cook does bring that to our teams. We still don't have him labeled as a target compared to all those running backs in that first tier that are being drafted ahead of him, but that does not mean you should be avoiding him. As for the concerns on the run-pass splits for this team, Kevin Stefanski, now a Cleveland Brown, yes, they may not be running as heavy as they did percentage-wise, but they still will rank near the top of the league in percentage of run plays versus pass plays, and their overall volume on offense is likely going to increase. Kirk Cousins, his pass attempts, while they were just over about 500 last season, we could see that going up by about 50 pass attempts, but ultimately that's way more than enough volume for Dalvin Cook to be successful, and for an injury-prone running back, you want more of his volume to come through the passing game as opposed to rush attempts. Those are much more taxing on the body. Up next, we have Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans, and he will actually be the leader of that second tier of running backs. Me personally, I never like to target running backs, especially in the early rounds, that will have virtually no use in the pass game. While that does include running backs like Derrick Henry, Henry is one of the few that can actually make up for that in sheer volume. He led the league in rushing last season, he also led the league in rush attempts, and he only played in 15 games. One thing we can guarantee from Tennessee this upcoming season is that Derrick Henry is going to be the focal point of their offense. Ryan Tannehill, he definitely outplayed what was expected and what we should expect from him for this upcoming season. When it comes to Derrick Henry, our expectations from him when compared to last season should remain unchanged. Inherently though, the week-to-week consistency for players that are only getting most of their work from the rush game, we do have to lower their floors. With most leagues being some sort of PPR or half PPR format, players that get 4, 5, 6 targets a game at the running back position, even with below average catch rates, you know what they're going to get from a floor perspective when you add in their base level volume in the run game. Derrick Henry, however, he is going to get a high amount of volume, but if he isn't able to convert those rush attempts into touchdowns, which he did have plenty inside the 5-yard line, if those somehow don't go in his favor, that could definitely hurt your team. Those should be few and far between though, so it shouldn't be of major concern, but definitely something to consider when deciding which running back is right for your team when drafting in the early rounds. Up next, we have Josh Jacobs, and admittedly, drafting Josh Jacobs does go against many of the main things we normally look for when targeting running backs. We want RBs that are on teams with strong defenses, potent offenses to give them plenty of red zone opportunities. The leads late in games could lend themselves to more run-heavy approaches in the later quarters, and Josh Jacobs really doesn't have any of that going for him. The Raiders, they're not going to be one of the league's best offenses, nor are they going to have a strong defense. However, Josh Jacobs, as a pure rusher, he's as good as they come. Last season, he ranked 5th in yards after contact, 9th in yards created, 8th in evaded tackles, and 6th in juke rate. So you know, when the ball is in his hands, you can expect good things. The coaching staff has already came out and said that they were disappointed with the way that the voting panned out. They think Josh Jacobs definitely should have gotten more respect, and inherently maybe his usage in the passing game goes up. I've heard the number 60 targets get thrown around here and there, but the problem is that's just an unrealistic expectation. Only 2 wide receivers on the team were able to eclipse 60 targets, none able to actually reach 50 receptions. So to think that's something that Josh Jacobs can bring to the table in 2020, it should in no way influence your decision on drafting him. What we're taking him for is his efficiency on the ground. The team re-signed Jalen Richard, who has 160 receptions throughout his career as a Raider, and spent pretty significant draft capital, the 80th overall pick, in drafting Lynn Bowden, who has 114 receptions through 3 years at Kentucky. Regardless though, Josh Jacobs is a legitimate threat to lead the league in rushing, and no matter how much you devalue a player for not being super heavily involved in the passing game, our ranking of Josh Jacobs as the RB12 is more than fair and is definitely a spot we feel more than comfortable drafting him. Up next, we have Austin Ekeler, who has never really been a player I've felt confident when selecting the draft button on. I did draft him in the Scott Fish Bowl, but it was more of a situation where the value just outweighed any potential risk factors associated with the pick, as opposed to me reaching on this player or targeting him ahead of players that are being drafted around him. Out of all of the running backs that are being taken in the 1st and 2nd round, he has the most amount of question marks around his situation when compared to 2019. For starters, Phillip Rivers is no longer the quarterback. Rivers historically loves to check the ball down to the running back position. In fact, in 2019, he passed the running back position at a higher rate than any quarterback in the league. That's definitely not something that we can expect if Tyrod Taylor is the starter for this team. We do have to fully be transparent and let you know that Tyrod Taylor does like to check down to the running back position. While Tyrod was the starter for the Buffalo Bills, LaShawn McCoy was a very potent running back in the receiving game, and in 2017 even had a season in which he received 77 targets. The overall passing volume and volume as a whole for this offense is destined to go down though, so the floor and the ceiling is going to be lower for Austin Ekeler. We also do have to ask ourselves if he is going to be the featured weapon in the red zone. While he was trusted in that area in 2019, they do have Justin Jackson. They also drafted Joshua Kelly in the 4th round, so while he is the favorite to lead this team in that area of the field, it's in no way guaranteed. If there's one thing we can do, it's to look at the facts. In the Los Angeles Chargers, they rewarded Austin Ekeler with a pretty hefty contract. He's being paid the 8th highest when it comes to annual salary, and no team is going to be paying a player at that high of a rate without expecting sizable production in return. So the old saying, follow the money, it reigns true, and Austin Ekeler, despite all of the question marks around his situation, his workload, his involvement, it's as safe as they come. The only thing that's going to hold him back is the overall limitations when it comes to this offense. But our ranking of him as the running back 13, it's fair. It may not feel good when you pull the trigger on draft day, but it's unlikely to be the reason that you fail on your picks in the early rounds. The final player we have today is Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers, and despite him being a player we're typically avoiding, he is listed as an avoid in our rankings. This is a player I've been starting to warm up to. I don't really want to target him in the early rounds, but if he falls to me and he's one of the running backs that is going to fill that role in my roster as a player who's going to get a secure workload, albeit not one of the highest in the league, he's still a good player, a great running back. In 2019, he ranked 8th in juke rate, 6th in yards created, 10th in yards per touch, and these are just things you cannot cannot take away from a running back. He's skilled, nobody's denying that. But the offseason moves, the direction that this team is heading in, it raises a lot of question marks. They drafted a quarterback as opposed to a wide receiver. Devin Funchess opted out of the season, leaving Devontae Adams as the only logical receiving threat for this offense. They also invested heavy draft capital into A.J. Dillon, presumably going to be eating into the volume of that of Aaron Jones. They still have Jamal Williams on the roster, so can we even expect a sizable workload, something similar to what we saw last season? It's in no way guaranteed. Aaron Jones finished the 2019 season as the running back 2 in fantasy points. He did that while ranking 15th in rush attempts, 11th in targets, so clearly that was on the back of major efficiency and definitely reliant on him scoring 16 touchdowns on the ground and another 3 through the air. We would be complete fools to expect that to reoccur for this upcoming season, but the difference is we're not drafting him as the RB2 in fantasy. No, we have him ranked as the running back 14. Definitely feel as though he can return value at that spot. He is going to be a bit riskier than those drafted around him in that range, but it's not going to be impossible for him to return value. It is very important, and we can't stress enough, hitting on these early round picks, you have to target the players that are the most safe. And when looking at Aaron Jones, he has more competition in the backfield than he ever has, especially considering A.J. Dillon's draft capital invested. But the Green Bay Packers, it's no secret, their offense is severely lacking offensive weapons. Aaron Jones, he's one of the best that they're going to have heading into this season, so for them not to use him, not to play him in situations where it matters the most, it's just not likely he is going to be a major piece of this offense. Do we expect the Green Bay Packers offense to even be near the league leaders when it comes to offensive opportunities or even points scored or red zone opportunities? Honestly, probably not. And that is going to impact Aaron Jones. But despite the opportunities maybe being more few and far between than they were in 2019, when they are in those situations, his number is going to be called at a higher rate than those around him. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. We really wanted to shine light on some players we haven't really spoken about in many of our early round running back videos. I hope this does help you in your draft process in determining which running backs are right for your team based on where they're going in drafts. But if you did enjoy this video, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.